Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by The Apocalypse. Finally, we're all outside playing again. Let's blow out the candles and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Love Spelled Backwards is Love. See the new rom-com that will make you gasp and howl with laughter. Love Spelled Backwards is Love is in theaters now. Welcome everybody to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And I don't even remember where I got that. I wrote that one so long ago that it's just, who knows? It's from
some rom-com you watched. I don't know, because you like those things.
Oh, I'm a huge fan. Give me, I don't know, 0 rom-coms all day and I will watch everyone.
Sleepless in Seattle. I know you have it on repeat.
Oh, I'll probably watch that one every 7 to 10 years and enjoy it for the most part. There's a few rom-coms that I genuinely like. I'm not saying they're great, but I like them. I like Hitch. I like Boomerang. It's an old.
I liked it too.
Really? Nice.
Is that really a rom? I guess it's a rom-com.
Yeah, it technically just enough. Enough silliness. Beyond that, I don't know how many other rom-coms I have in my back pocket that I'm like, yeah, that definitely qualifies as a rom-com. Yeah. Welcome to the show. We are filmmakers, writers. Todd's a full-time producer. Coming up this February, I will have been a full-time filmmaker for 10 years, which is kind of wild to say out loud.
Amazing.
Yeah. Big shift in my life for sure.
Let's just pause for a second to take that in. That's crazy. I remember working with you in the office, right? And I remember the day, and we've talked about this, but I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but I remember the day you told me you wanted to buy a camera. And I was such a jerk. I remember my exact words to you were, why? I didn't know how into film you were and how you wanted to, what you wanted to do with it, right? And so I thought it was like photography, but still, that's a kind of a shitty response, for a friend to say why. But now, fast forward, because that was, probably like a year or two before that ended, and fast forward, nearly 12 years, it's amazing. You've been doing this for a decade, man. That's a kudos to you, bro. It's a hard thing, and I know there have been times where it's the easy road would be, I'm just gonna go get a job at Starbucks when I need it, but you've never done that. You've always continued and pushed forward. That's pretty awesome.
It's pretty scary for sure. There's those moments when once or twice I was like a week away from literally going and working at Five Guys and Fries. I saw an ad and it was like, whatever, $10 or $12 an hour. And I was like, man, if I don't have something come up in the next week, I'm going to go apply because I don't know if I'll be able to make rent beyond next month. Luckily, one of my big things is I live very cheaply. I don't care about a lot of things in terms of, the things that I do care about are very expensive habits, whether it's gym equipment or film, which in the last 10 years, 90% of my income has gone towards film in one way or another, sometimes literally film stock, or lights or just projects or whatever. And so anything that wasn't baseline, like food and shelter, went towards work stuff, which is good because it's tax deductible, which is not a coincidence. I spent that money because I needed to reduce. It's either that or let Uncle Sam have it all, I guess. And that's a whole other topic, I guess. But thanks, man. I appreciate that. There's definitely been plenty of times when I was like, I don't know if I can afford to keep doing this. But the question I always come back to is, if I quit this, what else am I going to do? While I think I have the IQ to do a bunch of other things, there's nothing else that I really have to do with my life. And until that changes, I'm just going to keep doing this until I just don't love it anymore. The minute it becomes just work, a job, I'll go make more money doing something else because,
Yeah.
you know, assuming anybody will hire me now that all my skill sets are really just one thing.
Like, yeah, no, I get it. You know, there was a saying though too, you know, that well, there's two sayings. One that I wanted to bring up. One was this idea of you could fail at what you don't want to do. So you might as well try to do what you want to do, right? So because like you could go off and get a job and then all of a sudden, you know, work that job for 20 years and then get laid off, right? And that's not necessarily what you want to do. So you might as well do what you want to do, right? But then on the flip side of that, also not the flip side, but also there's this other idea of you know, you have this, you could call it a gift, but the way I like to propose it is you have a calling. You have this thing that gives you a reason to wake up in the morning, right? You're excited, right? I'm excited to wake up and come to my computer and work on music, you know, or to edit, you know, a video I'm working on or something. You're excited to wake up and write a script or work on your script or, you know, respond to that email to the client or finish that edit that, you know, you're about to get paid for. You know, and then so those days where you don't have anything in, it's still a pretty easy decision because that's what you want to do anyway. And, you know, like if you really don't have a lot of risk. You know, most people don't have as much risk as they think, right? Like it's, you know, if I quit my job and I just went on the road, I'm risking a lot personally just because of my kids, you know, that I've got to feed and stuff. But like most people who like, if you don't have kids that you have to feed, you can go hungry for a while. You know what I mean? You don't have to like put food in someone else's mouth. And I think that is a testament to you for recognizing that and putting all of your eggs in that basket, right? Because dude, you only live once, and unless you really have these things to risk, you know, you should go all in, which is what you've done for the last decade. And that's just awesome, man. That's just saying a lot. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I just want it to be known that I'm proud of that for you. I'm proud of you for doing that.
I appreciate that. And all that's true in terms of I only have to look out for me at this point in my life. And you're right. I am utilizing that to my full advantage. And the other thing is I'm not afraid of the risk that I do have to make, right? Whenever you start talking about, I don't know if I can pay rent, like there's stress involved and there's risk involved with that. There's a lot of single people in America who know exactly what I'm talking about. And for me, there's still no fear with that because I don't know if our audience really knows. I grew up very poor, like very, very poor. I don't want to belabor that point, but there was a short period of my life where we were literally showering out in the yard. Like I didn't grow up with cameras around me and just all the tools at my disposal. And so the idea that I could be here is just an astronomical fluke and from my child's eyes, right? Me as a kid looking up. And at the same time, I know what's at the bottom. I know what waits for me there. And you know what? I've done this before. I can do it again. There's nothing for me to be afraid of because I know exactly what's down there. And for that, I'm grateful, you know? And so why not take a shot? Why not go for it?
100%. And you have for a decade. That's badass,
that's right,
bro.
Oh, yeah.
Badass.
So let's see what someone else is taking a risk and gamble on. What are we doing today, man?
Today, we're covering The Raid Redemption. If you haven't seen it, please pause this episode and go watch it. We're going to run down a lot of stuff and give away a lot of stuff, so we don't want to spoil anything for you.
for surezies. We'll talk about a few things, some of the cinematography and camera work. We'll look at some of the fight choreography, the way they have fast and fluid fighting in here, as well as a little bit of the story and writing, some of the simple storytelling that they do, as well as kicking the dog storytelling and establishing the big bad, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
I'm going to kill this. This is terrible. Why do we pick these movies? Fuck.
Next time, the next movie we're going to do is going to be like by Bill Johnson and Jim Peters and the whitest names in the world, just so that you can actually nail all of
Two first names. Doug Ray. I want it as simple. Yeah, exactly. Frank.
I actually wrote a comedy series called Frank and Frank a while back. I was going to do it with our boy Aaron, who couldn't make this episode today, unfortunately. Just FYI, I tried to schedule him, but he was flying back from a Netflix gig, I believe. And so he just couldn't quite do it, but such is life. Anyway,
as is.
Take a shot, sir.
Oh, God, this is awful. All right, here we go. Synopsis of the film. A SWAT team is trapped in a tenement run by a ruthless mobster and his army of killers and thugs. Written and directed by Gareth Evans. Cinematography by Matt Flannery and Dimas Imam Subhono. Starring Iko Uwais as Rama. Donny Alamsyah as Andi. Yayan Ruhian as Mad Dog. I can't do it. I can't even read it. I can't even sound it out. Oh, I'm awful. I am an awful human being. Sahetapy as Tama and Pierre Gruno as Wahyu.
Nice. That's 1,000 times better than I would have done.
Ouch.
Yeah, that's how bad it would have been. No clip today because I don't think very many in our audience speak Indonesian. I certainly do not. And so we'll just dive right in. You've seen this before, right? This wasn't your first time.
No, I hadn't. I had heard a lot about it, and I saw there was like a sequel or a follow-up or something, or maybe even an American version. I can't remember. But I saw that. But I always heard that this one was the best one.
Yeah, I think there's one or two that came after this. I saw the Redemption Raid 2. I don't remember if I saw the third one or if there was even a third one. But yeah, this is definitely the superior, the Raid. So I guess give it to me in pieces. As a story, yay or nay, and then from a fighting standpoint, action movie standpoint, yay or nay.
I mean, I liked all of it. I thought the story. I personally thought the story was really solid. I mean, we open up with this guy. We see his who's kind of waking up and training at home, and then we see his wife. We know that she's pregnant. We see him kiss her goodbye. We have this connection with her and with him and her right away, immediately. We already want him to get back to her, and we know this is going to be a long day for him. And then very next shot, we're like right into the van with all the guys, and they're going to this thing. We're getting all this exposition of this is where we're going. This is what we're doing. This is the, we get all of that. We get to the place. There's the stress of actually being there. I felt stressed the whole time. A lot of it to do with that setup, with the wife at the beginning. And then they meet this random guy, and we're wondering, who is this guy? Okay. He's coming along with them. Okay. They get into the building. I don't really know exactly what, other than getting to the main guy, what the real goal is, other than to like clean out this building. But then we get more exposition throughout about this guy who they picked up. And because the whole time I'm thinking, there's got to be more cops coming, right? And they're just going to wipe out everybody. But then we find out, there aren't any more coming. And we find that out, after some people have died and then it's just this whole, how is he going to get out of here? There's no way he's going to get out. And constantly I'm thinking, there's no way he's going to get out of this. There's no way he's going to get out of that. The fight scenes are amazing. They're dope. They're so cool. I really wish Aaron was on this episode. I would love to hear what he thinks about the fighting choreography. I just loved it. I loved it. I love that the main hero gets the crap kicked out of him. It's not just he's beating everybody up, which he does that too, but he gets beaten down a lot. I love, I loved it all. I thought that the story was solid. His brother being part of the bad, the bad guys. I just thought I thought it was great. There might have been, a couple of couple of head tilts now and then, but for the most part, it was such a great popcorn movie to sit down and just enjoy. I could watch it again right now, pretty easily.
Yeah, they don't waste a lot of time getting to the action, right? It's just
Right.
let's establish our main guy, and we hear him have a conversation with his dad, like, I'm going to bring him back, and you're just like, I don't know what that means exactly. And then we're suddenly in the SWAT car, making our way, and from there, I mean, it takes minutes before the first set of people are going down. This was designed from the beginning to be like a high octane, let's get straight to it, and designing, I think, the story to be so simple, right? We're just gonna have these guys get trapped in a building filled with bad guys and go. And you're right, yeah. It was kind of obscure, even this second viewing. I've only seen it once before, and I remember feeling the exact same way that you just described. Like, I enjoyed it all. It was quick and lean, and I cared about everybody in here. And then you find out that that's his brother, and that adds in another layer of like, oh crap, like I really want them both to live now. Like, I thought this was going to be a big showdown, but it turned out to be like a reunion. And that was fun. Yeah, for me, this still holds up. I think the drama doesn't play quite as strong the second time through, just because once you kind of know some of those twists, there's really no other cards in their hand, but the way they designed it, it's still such a good rewatch because of the reasons that we're talking about. It's so fast to the action, and the fight sequences are incredible. They could redo this movie and make the story a bit better, or even a lot better for all I care. But you could never match the action in this film. You just can't do it. It would be a lesser film trying to redo all this action. And while I finished my rewatch and notes and set up a little early, so I started digging in, and apparently, like, all the fight choreo was done by Iko, the main character Rama, and Mad Dog, Yayan Ruhian. They did all the fight choreography in this, and which also kind of explains why their final fight sequence together is so incredible, because that kicked at a certain point. This has been a running theme for the last few episodes. You get to like a point of, okay, they've kind of done everything I could think of them doing, right? You have some of these incredible deaths. The guy, like, they have a great use of whatever's right at hand, right? Whether it's guns, knives, machetes. They have an entire machete fight that was just like finding really fun ways to like slice people's throats open. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, but it all had this like movement to it. So because it's in a building, you can change scenes so easily. Yeah. So in a new scene, so that's why, like, I don't know. For me, I feel like it's so rewatchable because we're in one room and stuff happens. There's a certain type of choreography, whether he's taking, and Rama is amazing. So like, he'll make a decision and he'll just do it, and we see that from the very beginning when he grabs the tank out from underneath the sink and he throws it in the fridge immediately. And then he just makes this decision to do that, or he takes the axe and he's axing the floor to cut a hole in the floor. He just immediately makes a decision and does it. I love it when main heroes do that, when they don't sit there with them and think for 20 seconds. No, do it. But then they move into a whole nother room, and then we have this whole nother scene, whole nother piece of fight choreography, and then they move into another room. It's just so great. It's brilliant that it's all in one building, because you can just walk into another room, and then you have this whole other type of fighting, whether that be machetes, like you said, or guns or knives or whatever. So yeah.
And I love that. Like, it's rare to find a movie that does both gunplay and like martial arts. Like, there aren't very many of these. Usually you kind of stick to one or the other. And here, and you could go a couple episodes back to find another one that does it equally well. There's really great gunplay. They just keep elevating all these things, right? The knife fight alone was already like, holy crap, like this is intense. And you're watching him like tear people's knees apart. Like, it's just brutal. But just within the fighting itself, like, I love that there's not too much of this posing and framing up a punch or a kick or whatever. It's very fast, very fluid, and it feels like a real-time fight in that it's breathless and everyone is trying to win every single second. Just because you finished one guy, like you put him down on the ground, you are immediately moving to the next guy because he's coming at you without taking a pause. And most fight, movies with a lot of fighting have these brief little pauses between those moments. And they clearly worked their asses off and trusted each other. And maybe they were working with a bunch of guys they knew from wherever they, fight and work out, because it just felt absolutely like masterful, their ability to move from one thing to the next without making it feel like anyone's waiting for you or you need to wait for them to throw their punch. Like, it's all happening. Now, there are certainly, some moments of convenience that happen here and there, like early in that fight, that knife sequence. There's some moments where the henchmen are kind of entering only after the last bad guy's taken down. Like, oh, he killed him, and now from that same doorway there's another bad guy with a knife coming out. Like, it doesn't bother me though, because it just kept the action moving, and it's just good pacing, and it never felt cheap, because as you work your way through these scenes, there's plenty of opportunities to challenge the hero with 2, 3, 4 guys at a time. And so it never felt like, oh, we're just, going to make it easier on the hero. Instead, it felt like we're building up to something else. And in that way, it never, the moments of convenience never felt too convenient because of how much inconvenience was to come. It all just was fluid. And it's impressive too, because this was a $1.1 million budget, which is pretty insane for the amount of stuff that they have going on in here.
Wow.
I've seen other $1 million. In fact, I watched someone recommended a horror film on Hulu that I watched, and I thought they shot this movie with like $50,000. And I was really impressed with like the lighting and cinematography. And then I Googled it, and it was like they had $1 million budget. And I couldn't help but just think, someone pocketed about $900,000 and just spent the last $100K on that movie, because it was just trash. Wow. But to see them take $1 million budget and make it look like a $20-30 million budget is really impressive. And I think and they shot, I had a few more minutes than normal. I'll link you to the Wikipedia. That basically is where I'm getting all these brief notes. But they shot on these Panasonic, not quite DV cam, but they shot in HD on these really cheap cameras. And they built what's called a fig rig, it looks kind of like a Movi, but I think it's more built out of PVC pipe. So instead of like a Steadicam rig, they were going full on handheld, and using these really, I don't know, it was maybe $5 or $7 to put together these Steadicam rigs, these little handheld workstations. And it allowed them to do some really cool stuff, like that scene where they jump down through that floor you're talking about, when he axed the floor open and the guy jumps down and then the camera follows him down afterwards. Like, they had the camera op on like wires so that he could fall through the floor, half of them, and then pass the camera off on the other side to another camera op that was down there waiting. And whenever you have a really light rig with a very small footprint, you can do simple, cool things like that. And so it's very much, them maximizing their potential with that budget and just with creativity. I'm blown away because the camera work perfectly follows the action. Like if a guy is being stabbed, the camera is moving with the hand to provide, excitement, but it's still wide enough to show the context of where it's landing and everything that's happening. This is not Paul Greengrass filmmaking. This is very much, we understand every single beat that's happening and how it lines up with the scene, instead of just, 10-year-old or 5-year-olds karate hand movement, right? Cha 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 cha. You see everything that's happening, and it's beautiful. It's perfectly telegraphed to the camera, but not in a way that it feels like it's being telegraphed to the camera, and that gets to the fluidity of it all.
Well, yeah, and I mean, maybe they saved a little bit of money by making a lot of it indoors too, right? Where there's not a lot of windows. There's some windows there's plenty of windows in like some shots and stuff, but where, if you're lighting one hallway, you have pretty similar lighting for the next hallway, right? Obviously when you're in a room, like, and there's a window in that room that's different, you have to light it differently and stuff, but making a lot of it indoors. But I'm not diminishing it. I'm saying that that's smart, doing it indoors where you can do a lot of the lighting similar. But then they also had some really difficult stuff, like, the shots where at the very beginning where of the fighting, where it was dark, and then when the guys from the second or the next floor up could see them when a muzzle shot like lit up the room. That's very hard to do. It's a very hard thing. You have to plan that kind of thing. So they were still brilliant with it, but it was, that might have helped a little bit.
I guess for one, I don't know if, filming in Indonesia was able to stretch their dollar a little bit further than if you were shooting in America, right? Sometimes shooting on location can be extraordinarily expensive. But maybe if you pick the right location and the right team, and like you said, the right setup, shooting indoors and this dilapidated building that you don't have to set deck to the nines, which comes into picking the right story, that can allow you a lot of freedom to say, okay, let's pick our moments to splurge a little bit, whether that's that little muzzle flash, slow motion moment, right? Which is really fun. Or, jumping out the window, which that's a lot of setup. That's wire rigging. And that's a fake window that if you want to get more than one take, well, you're going to need a crew to come in and install that, have new windows on standby. And so maybe standardizing some of because they break a lot of windows, and tables and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And if you say, okay, if we can just pick those moments, maybe it's not the end of the world that we don't have, $5 or $10 million. We can do a lot with 1.1. And then picking that camera also kind of chose their style for them, right? It's a very high contrast film, which plays into this universe. Like this is a gritty underworld, seedy place. So why wouldn't it be kind of like high contrast, and you can't really see into the shadows that well, and you're losing some highlights here and there. And now it just gets into the basics of cinematography. Let me just compose a good image. Okay, let's pick a really cool building that has cool features, these sweet stairwells and a courtyard. And now our most expensive piece to this whole thing will be maximized. We're not going to pick a boring building. We're going to pick a cool one, and we're going to dress it down. In fact, right? We're going to spend some time making it look worse, and then we can shoot wherever we want. They had a lot of fun other things in terms of just combining the story idea with, maximum impact to the viewer. Like the guy running down the hallway with his hands behind his back, right? It looks like he's pretending to be tied up, and then he shoots a cop. Like, that's a really fun, interesting moment that costs you absolutely nothing. That's writing giving you a lot to do. That's free. Like, these are free things that you can do. What's not free is that makeshift bomb with the fridge in the gas tank. But maybe it's also not that cheap. How much does that fridge cost? You know, oh, we can spend $200 or borrow this fridge from a junkyard, throw it in this apartment, and we can, from that same junkyard, pull out a gas tank. And now in post, all we really need to do is add some fumes coming out, shove the thing, and we just, for $400,
yeah,
plus the explosion, that probably did cost something. But, or not, I don't know, because these guns, I was reading on that same wiki entry, these guns are all airsoft guns. And all the casings flying and all that kind of stuff was mostly done in post. And so you probably set aside 150, 200K for post visual effects, and maximize everything you're doing on the day in post, which you don't want to.
That's incredible.
It really is. It's just knowing your moments, like, okay, can I call in a favor, or can I, what's this going to cost? You might ask ahead of time, say, hey, you put in a call to, 3 or 4 visual effects companies, and say, hey, here's what we're doing. What's this going to run us? Okay. Well, if it's going to cost that for X amount of shots, we'll do half of that, and the rest we'll just do in reaction shots, right? You don't necessarily need to see a gun slide back and shoot. If you do that once or twice, great. You've sold the idea, and the rest can live on the reactions of the bullets hitting someone, or someone reacting to getting shot or shooting someone. Like, you only need to do that a couple of times to make it feel real to the audience, and the rest doesn't matter. We just need to believe it once for you to do it 1,000 times. And that's just good directing. And Gareth Evans is a freaking king, man. Of just sell the idea. Don't sell it 1,000 times. Sell it once.
That's perfect, because then it would get really exhausting.
True.
As well to the viewer to be sold and sold and sold and sold and sold every time. And I mean, they do sell it more than once, obviously, but it's never too much to get exhausted by it, but it's just enough to start getting like, oh my gosh, like, I need a break. And then they give you breaks. And whenever you want to talk about story, I mean, like, they do such a great job. The best action movies are strong with story, and they do a great job of putting enough story in here to where we're not just seeing people get sliced up or shot, and that is the story. No, there's the brother, there's the guy who lives there, is trying to get to his wife. There's the crooked cop. There's the Rama with his wife. There's a lot of stuff woven in there. That who's the sergeant that's heading. I don't know who he is, but when he dies with Mad Dog, it's like, oh man, that hurt, because he's not going to abandon Rama. He's not. He's there. He's like straight laced, and he's gonna get everybody out, And then so when he dies, oh man, it hurts.
It does, and that's a really important scene, because this is kind of where we really establish Mad Dog as a big bad henchman. And it's important because he's small, right? So he needs a little more build up to feel dangerous and worthy of a big fight that's coming down the line. And so they have a great setup when he allows the guy to live, right? He's got the drop on him. He's got a gun. Dude's only got a knife. This is the proverbial, you brought a knife to a gunfight, and he doesn't squeeze the round off. Not only that, but he puts the gun down, and he just starts, he has the advantage, gives it up, because his thing is the actual fighting. He loves it. Whenever you have someone not just so confident, but just so in love with the fight, you suddenly want to see what they got. And to your point earlier, like, it's even Rama gets his butt kicked a time or two, but everyone does. No one is the perfect fighter in this movie. And that's so much more satisfying, at least in this universe, than seeing someone just, tee everyone up and knock them out. And so it's a great setup, and allows us to really start to buy into this smaller guy as someone you should absolutely fear, and have a little trepidation for, especially whenever it comes to that final blow, because I'm so in love with that sequence because it's a great use of sound, right? The music and the sound effects, to kill the cop with high drama, with this brutal finality to it. And so what they do, right, is they cut out all the ambient noise, all the Foley of the footsteps and the punching sounds. And now it's just emotional music and sound effects for emphasis. It's not a head cracking noise. It's, this bassy, instrument kind of striking as it happens. And I think that's important for, a number of reasons. For one, to let you know, whenever the big fight happens, they start kind of reenacting some of these moments, and it's triggering you to remember, like, oh God, like this guy, he's got the upper hand. There's something bad about to happen. But it's also important because you've been desensitized up until this point with all the violence. Like, it's just been non-stop knives going into people's necks and scapulas and throats being ripped out or whatever. And so suddenly to have all that stuff stripped away kind of resets you in order to dial in emotionally with the scene, because, what we haven't had a lot of is, slow dramatic music. And so suddenly whenever you switch those gears, you're now much more in sync, and it feels that much more bad because it still hits me. I'm still, only my second time through, but I was still like, oh God, no, it hurt, which is so crazy because there's no actual bone crunching or any of that stuff in there. That's just beautiful sound design and directing to choose that moment to establish all of those things. It's just huge.
I could not agree more. And that needed to happen for Mad Dog, because up until that point, I think that I really viewed the main guy as the main guy, right? Who was it?
Wahyu?
Well, yeah, Wahyu. I viewed him as the main, I guess I kind of looked at it like a video game, right? You get to the boss. Right. And so he's the boss. Well, he's not. He wasn't really the boss. The boss was Mad Dog.
That's right.
But we find that out when he finally in that scene, when he finally kills him, and you're like, oh man, because it's also that moment where he snaps his neck. It's also a very long moment. Like, they take their time in him setting it up and getting into position, because also it's very hard to break someone's neck that way. It's not just like how they do it in movies where you just like fink and he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's like really, you have to put all your whole body into it. And so he sets it up, and he's like, one, he has to beat him down to the point where he has no energy left to even fight. Right. So he beats him the crap up, and then gets in that position, takes a long time to do it. And so that establishing not only the whole fight scene, but then how long it takes him to get into position to snap his neck is like, okay, now. And then when it happened, I thought, oh no, wait a minute. Or before it happened, as it was happening, I thought, there's no way. They're taking too long. Somebody's going to shoot through the door and kill this guy. And it doesn't happen. And when it doesn't happen, I thought, oh, wait, he can't be dead. No, he's not dead. Which speaks to how I was connected with that character. I thought this guy is going to be with Rama. They're going to get out, and get through it. And when it didn't happen, it kind of pulled a little bit away from me. It was just great filmmaking. It was just great filmmaking in that moment.
It's fantastic. And we'll come back to Wahyu here in a second, but that big fight scene at the end with the Mad Dog, is teed up at this point. And I love it. There were two moments that got me really giddy, where I just started laughing, right? Because I was just so excited about what was happening on screen. I think the first big one was in the lab, whenever they're taking all these guys out in the lab, and then Rama jumps on the table and starts running, and then the other guy jumps on the table and starts running. It felt just the coolest thing in the world to me. I was laughing my ass off and just so excited for, you know, the action sequence that was about to happen. The other time was when Mad Dog, once again, and this was established early on with that previous fight sequence, he lets the brother down in order to let both of them take him on at the same time. Like, that's just his mentality, and that's why he's called a Mad Dog, right? It's not about like just winning. It's about the process. He has respect for the process of fighting and respecting your opponents. And that's kind of wild for like someone who has the title of Mad Dog. And whenever he sets him down and no one says a word, the guy just, Rama enters the room, he sees him, stops wailing on his brother, walks over, lets the guy down, and then indicates to them like split up, and walks in between them. And it was at that moment I just started laughing. I think I even clapped. Like, I was just so amped up for this fight. And it's incredible, right? I just love that buildup. It's a slow entrance, right? Even just before they even establish what they're going to be doing, it's just the sound of punches being landed. And then Rama's really slow reaction, the slow push in, and then the slow start as Mad Dog lets the brothers fight together, right? All of that, right, is happening. And it probably took, I don't know, half an hour, but no, it felt like, just ages before the fight actually began. And it just set the table for you to, really enjoy the fight and catch your breath after everything you've been experiencing up to that point. And I love that whole sequence, right? And they do, again, they have that moment when they're adding tension when we move into the music and sound effects. Now, they kept some ambient and Foley, but they were kind of starting to repeat that last fatality from the sergeant. And so that was right before Mad Dog, finally gets stabbed in the neck with the broken light, which was crazy because he continues fighting and with even more urgency. You think he's already kind of reached his top gear, and it made sense. Like, the adrenaline's going, he's not ready to die, and you're just like, this guy is unstoppable. And then for his brother Rama to finish off with kill, that throat slice was just perfect. I loved it, and it was gross. But even, stepping back and looking at that whole sequence, that's a great use of a single room. Lots of space and atmosphere. And I can just imagine that it's really easy to rehearse that fight sequence in a gym, right? Maybe we don't have access to that just yet, but if we know we're going to be shooting in this big empty space, well, now we can stage that. Okay, there's a light overhead, this is it. This is our one thing that we get. Now let's stage, a 5-10 minute fight sequence, just the three of us, and work through that and make it incredible. And it's just, it's incredible. Like, that's one of my favorite fight sequences, definitely of the last decade. And worth it. It just freaking works for sure. I don't know if you want to add anything into that.
Just, I agree with everything 100%. And just the only thing I would, I guess, add would be that I loved that it was a fight sequence for Mad Dog. It was literally built for him, right? So the sequence before where he ends up killing the cop was for him, was to establish him as a character, but it was really also for the cop. We didn't know who, he was winning sometimes, Mad Dog was winning sometimes, but the whole time you're like, it was focused on the cop, because we're as a viewer, we're like on his side, right? At this point, because it's 2-on-1, usually it's like 2-on-1 against the hero, right?
That's good.
But in this scenario, it's 2-on-1 against the bad guy, and the bad guy is kicking ass. And so you're sitting, and it's 2-on-1 against him, and he's beating them. So you're sitting there thinking like, wait, who am I for? Because this guy is such a badass that I kind of want to root for him, even though he's the bad guy. And it's taking two of them to even wear him down a little bit. And even like you said, when he gets stabbed in the neck, he's still fighting and he's still winning. You're just, you can't imagine it. Right. And so the whole thing is, and the camera I felt like was very much on him. You know, they kind of had to, because it was 2-on-1 and you have to be on the one guy they're fighting, not on the two guys. So even though our hero is part of it, Rama is part of this fight, it's really a fight. It's really Mad Dog's fight. And so they don't skirt around that. The camera is on Mad Dog the whole time, whether he's getting beaten up or beating them up. And I just love that. I love that we don't give a shit. We're going to focus on Mad Dog the whole time. He'll win or lose. And it just felt really visceral. Like I couldn't decide if I wanted him to win or not, and whatever. It was great.
Good note, man. That's so good, because you're right. We don't usually get to see one bad guy against two heroes. And having that dynamic did create some conflict. And he needed to earn that fight, right? By being as good or better than both of them, or at least making you believe he is. And yeah, you don't, as the audiences are trained to root for the underdog. And so you have to believe that he is much better than both of them. And he earns that in spade. And I think you're right. The camera work following him, tracking him, helps add to his superiority a lot. Yeah. Ooh.
Absolutely. And you know, it's like, it also goes the brothers together fighting him. And then obviously his brother is the top dog at the end of all this, because everybody else is dead. So his brother basically walking him out, it like establishes them together as brothers, even though they're still enemies.
Yeah.
You know, because they fought to it just such it. All of this is all story arc. All of this is all like pieces that come together, and it's just so well written, so well executed. Yeah, I loved that.
On a simpler level, some of the simple storytelling that they do is, I like it. I mean, at the beginning, we have the cops are trying to keep everyone quiet, right? They're tying them up, they're gagging them, they're moving in silence. And so they're visually doing a great job without saying much, of communicating what their goal is, which is to not be heard, not be found out, to make it to the top without anybody catching on. And then, of course, you have the kid who screams and gets shot in the neck, which is a great little sequence. It's brutal. And I like that it's done by the crooked cop, the one guy that ends up being a large piece of crap, is the one who does that, not any of the good cops, right? Who aren't dirty, who aren't crooked. And so that's all going back to what you just literally said. Good writing. And it tells a complete story. And then that kid, yells police to another kid, and that kid triggers their alarm. And that, the way they settle on that alarm for, a good 30, 40 seconds of just looking at it kind of going off, is playing right into that visual communication that they'd been building up. It's a perfect contrast to watching them move silently and gagging people. And now we cut to a security room, right? Lots of monitors. The Wahyu calls for a lockdown and call the neighbors or whatever he says. And of course, all the fallout ensues, right? Snipers, hitmen are taking out peripheral cops. And that creates the feeling that our SWAT team is now trapped, because there's nothing on the outside that calls for their safety. Instead, nothing but death awaits them on the outside. And of course, everything on the inside is hunting them. And so very simple, easy visual elements that lead you to completely understand their predicament. And that's really great writing and directing. And also, I think it's necessary because if you want this to play for an international audience, which Gareth Evans is, I don't know where he's from, but it's not Indonesia. And it's just easy visual elements like that help the story digest a lot easier for non Indonesian audiences. Whereas maybe you could cheat a little bit if you're making an American film for American audiences, a little more talky, little less showy. But always, if you can do both, always do both. And kick the dog storytelling that I mentioned at the show opening. This is where they establish our main villain, right? We watch him, Wahyu, violently execute a row of guys and then tease the final guy by putting the gun on his shoulder, right? It's empty. And before killing him with a hammer, right? That's all incredibly violent. Now, ultimately, he's toothless, right? In this world of incredible fighters, but we need a quick, simple, effective way to identify the main villain. And so we give him the very first punch to set that in place before everything else. And it also helps set the tone for the brutality that we're going to be in for. And so they're doing a lot with that opening scene. And it's relying on an age-old tactic of, let's see the bad guy do something to a helpless person, right? That's why you call it kick the dog storytelling, because, you know, man's best friend, someone ideally that we like, but more importantly, someone who can't defend themselves. And you just watch the bad guy do that. And if you do it well, there's cheap ways of doing it and there's good ways of doing it. And this is really well done, because I bought it. Like, I think this is the hardest dude in here. And don't mess with this guy. Of course, you end up finding out he doesn't do anything for the rest of the film. Like, I think he stabs Andi, Rama's brother, in the hand, and then he gets shot in the head. Like, he dies very as easily as anybody else in this movie, maybe easier. But you know, you gotta establish him, and you gotta establish this universe. And it's really well done. Only last notes are the palette here is very blue and gray, and it just feels dark. It feels lifeless. I love the simple and perfect lighting that you're kind of talking about earlier, right? You can throw this light back over here, whatever they're doing. It's good enough ambient light, but it's not glitzy. It's not very pretty to look at, which, given the camera package, makes perfect sense. It's really rough, which goes perfectly with the camera work itself, right? A lot of handheld. It's very imprecise and it's fast. It's actiony, and that plays in with all the fight choreography. Just something to study. I think I can imagine, and this is one of those conversations I wish Aaron was here for, because I'd love to hear about how they go about rehearsing this stuff. Because in an action film where you have at least a little budget, you can have your fight choreography taking place weeks in advance in a gym, and they're working through not just the fight sequence itself, but they're also testing ways to shoot the fight sequences in order to sell the fight. Here's the best way to shoot this punch. Shoot it from over here, and now you can rack focus to the guy coming in through the door behind him, or whatever. Like, the fight choreography team can work through all those things and give you all these suggestions as a director, and say, okay, here's a bunch of things that we're seeing on our end. Do with it what you will. And yeah, I would just love to pick Aaron's brain about, do you do that on your own and then you bring in the director at a certain point, or is the director there from the beginning? How does all that work, all that process? Eventually we'll have him in for a full episode. We'll let him pick something in and like see what he has to say about all that nonsense. But yeah, I'd
love to hear what he'd like to cover.
Actually. I know. I feel bad because I mentioned, I was like, man, I was talking on the Matrix episode how upset I was that I didn't think to bring you in on that. He's like, oh man, I watched that like 7 or 8 times and went in theaters.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I believe it.
You know what? I didn't know that, but I absolutely knew that. Like,
yeah.
That completely makes sense, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's all I got, man. Any final thoughts?
Cool. I had a question for you, which would be, just because we've talked ad nauseum about, how good the cinematography is, how good the writing and story is, how good the the lighting and the acting was, and essentially maybe not necessarily the acting, but what, if anything, would you change in this film? Or did you feel like you were taken out, at any moments during the film, taken out of the moment by anything, and specifically whether that be filmmaking or writing or acting or whatever? Is there anything that you'd change?
It's hard. Like, I don't know that there's a ton that I would change. I would certainly want to re-look at some of the drama, at some of the story elements. The introduction I thought was interesting because you're watching him pray. I think he's a Muslim, which I think is pretty cool. We don't really see that in America. We don't see heroes that start the story by praying, to the east or wherever, or to Mecca. I forget the how that actually operates in Islam. But I love that. I might choose a different beginning. It felt very, I don't know, Training Day to me, in the sense that you have a cop waking up, kissing his wife goodbye, and it works. It establishes him very, very well, and it relies so much on their chemistry in order to sell that for the rest of the movie, and it does. It works, but I would probably structure that a little differently. I would want to play a little bit more with the ending. It felt still very nonsensical whenever you're thinking about the two bad guys, basically the captain or whoever he is, the white-haired guy, the crooked cop, and Wahyu. I have no idea what all that was about. Like, it felt very rushed whenever you're thinking about the villain has a gun to his head and he's sitting here talking himself out of his own importance. Like, why would you do that? Yeah. That's a terrible tactic. And then
great point.
You have a cop who, looks to kill himself. I don't know. That stuff doesn't quite click. It just felt like we're just trying to end the movie, which is fine. It works. You already had your best fight sequence. And if you don't have anything that can top that, you're right. Get the hell out. Like, don't bore us, get to the chorus. And so, yeah, those are the only things that I would really look at, because I know they shot it on like a whatever $2,000 camera. That doesn't bother me. I think it's beautiful for what it's trying to do. Some of the shots are actually beautiful. And I'm pretty sure they shot it on some fantastic lenses. It wasn't like they went full cheapy on it. Can I find? No, that's not it. I'm on their IMDb page and I'm going to look at the technical specs, which they moved around. Yeah, they shot these on Zeiss Ultra Primes, and with using an adapter in order to use it, because this is a micro 4/3 sensor, and that's today's parlance would be like mirrorless cameras or that kind of thing. You don't shoot $1 million movies on cameras that cheap. Like, that's insanity. But I love that they did it and it completely works. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. So cool. None of that stuff bothers me whatsoever. But if I was going to look at something to change, those are the things I would start to look at. How can I make a slightly bigger story without giving away the big reveal? Because that's the other thing, is if you tell too much story, you start to get the idea that, oh, this guy is someone important to him. So it's a balancing act, and ultimately they nailed it. And yeah, I don't know. Is there anything that you would shift?
No, I mean, that was a great answer. And I loved your answer, actually, because it doesn't increase the cost of the movie. You didn't say anything about like, I would actually spend more money on lighting, or I would have, I would have used a better camera. Like, no, you're like, okay, this is what we've got. Okay, let's look at story, right? And because that's always does not matter what your budget is. That will win. You could make a timeless $10,000 movie, right? Or you can make a shitty $10 million movie. It happens all the time. And so I loved your answer there. I did agree, the end specifically was like, just felt like they were just trying to end it a little bit, but I also did not care, because I had been gifted this great movie up until that point that I was totally fine. So yeah. Okay. Great answer.
Nice.
That's it.
Nice. What are you going to recommend this week?
Oh, I've been I've been waiting for a good time to recommend this film because it's one of my all-time favorite martial art, I guess you could call it martial art film. Kung Fu, I'm not sure. But I'm a big Bruce Lee fan, and if you're going to recommend anything in relation to some Bruce Lee film, it has to be Enter the Dragon, from I think early 70s, 75, 73, something like that. Put him, I mean, he was already on the map essentially, but just like solidified him as one of the greats of all time. And that movie was, I mean, just unbelievably wonderfully perfect in I feel like every single way, and it's so rewarding to watch him in action the way that he was. So yeah, Enter the Dragon.
Wow. I'm going to recommend a documentary that's gut-wrenching, not heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching. It's brutal and it's about Indonesia. It's called The Act of Killing, and it's about, I think it was a genocide that took place there, maybe 30, 40 years ago, something like that. And it's actually interviewing the people who committed the genocide, and you're spending time with them and what they think about what they did. And it's,
Wow.
And it's weird. They do some very wild things that, you know, is both funny and it puts you through a lot of emotions, because they start reenacting some of the things they did through Hollywood tropes. So like they talk about like an interview or an investigation, and they talk about what they did, but they restage it for the documentary in the style of like a noir Humphrey Bogart. And it's just so wild. And there's so much to wrestle with while watching this thing. It'll certainly haunt you, but it'll have you questioning a lot of things. And I think it won an Academy Award. If not, it was certainly nominated.
Wow.
But I'm pretty sure it won Best Documentary that year. Yeah. And so,
Wow, I have so many questions. I'm gonna go watch that. That sounds amazing.
it's
Damn.
some
You win. You out Whataburgered me.
Stay tuned for next week where we lighten up and find out what Spider-Man's up to. We're gonna check out No Way Home, because why not? We haven't done enough new movies lately, and we realize that, but it's not our fault. There just aren't that many new movies that we want to cover that have been coming out. And we have no idea what to expect. We haven't seen this movie yet. But we'll cover that. And then actually, I don't know when that episode is going to come out. Just as an FYI, for the next few weeks, we're going to be releasing some episodes from our Patreon. We do bonus episodes, and I'm going to try to talk Todd and I into doing two bonus episodes, going forward a month. And maybe at the beginning of the year when Todd and I take a break, a hiatus, then we can release a few episodes from that without diluting the actual content that we're giving to our Patreon members. And so you'll get a taste of some of the things that we do for our bonus episodes for our Patreon members. And maybe that'll nudge you over to drop a couple bucks in our pocket so that we can keep making fun, cool stuff like that. Really, all I'm trying to do is get the show to pay for itself. And so that would please me to no end for sure. But I also think it's just kind of fun to see, I don't know, it's another more direct connection to some of our listeners. And that's just kind of fun. And so no worries if you don't want to do that. It's fine. But if you do, I love you more than everyone else, just FYI. So stay tuned for that. I don't remember which episodes I'm picking. I do have an interview that I'm going to release with an author who wrote his first book. It's a sci-fi book. His name is Kevin Faulkner. And I think it's called The Sixth Traveler. He changed the title after I read it. And so forgive me for not remembering if that's not exactly it. But I think it's called The Sixth Traveler. And so we did an interview talking about the process of writing his book. And there's a couple other episodes that I'm excited about. I'm going to put out the sunshine versus underwater episode where Todd and I discuss the difference and similarities between Sunshine and Underwater. I love that episode. I think that was a really cool bonus episode for sure. And one other to be determined. We have an episode on The Guilty. We have an episode on Finch. We have an episode on, and these are shorties. They're like only 20, 30 minutes. But we also have one on Coda. All three of those I thought were really good. And so I don't know, maybe you can pick for me, Todd, and let me know what you'd prefer.
Okay.
But yeah. And so with that in mind, if you're enjoying the show, feel free to just subscribe and review us on the tunes, and leave us a note if you want us to talk about a thing, or something you find interesting, or just to say hello and to keep up the good job. It's always nice to hear from anyone. I literally see numbers as every once in a while I'll check our stats. We're getting up to over 1,000 downloads a month. And at some point, I'm hoping that we'll break 2,000 downloads in a month. For us, that's a lot. It's not a lot for the Freakonomics and NPRs out there. They're doing like 10,000 a month, 1 million a month. And for us, like, I'm excited. We're finally steadily doing like 1,000 a month. And maybe this month will be our first 2,000. I don't know. I don't think so, but have hope.
Positive thinking.
That's actually a
Merry Christmas
cocktail reference. And if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/TheRaidRedemption.
And our quote of the day is from director Gareth Edwards. I found there are a lot of advantages to being on a small budget and having a small crew. You get some very intimate performances and naturalistic cinematography. I think some people get confused between development and pre-production. Yeah,
I thought, I don't know, for obvious reasons, well, whatever reason, for a very obvious reason, the director Gareth Evans made me think of the other director, Gareth Edwards. So I was just curious, what he had to say. And I love that. I think it's completely accurate. Being on a small budget with a small crew actually affords you a lot of things that you don't get with these bigger budgets and bigger crews. For one, the oversight. You don't have a bunch of producers and stakeholders breathing down your throat because they're worried about their $150 million budget. And now you have to shoot all this extra coverage and you have to cover your ass in post. Instead, it's just, hey, go have fun because we don't expect our money to come back to us. Like most small indie film investors know, it's whatever, bro. Just go have fun. We're here to enjoy the process, not because we think we're going to make $1 billion. And that gets you so much more. That gets you creative freedom. It also means that, if we want to shoot and get ahead of schedule, we don't have to worry about moving these huge cranes all over the building or all over the forest. Like, you can turn around and start getting ahead because your shoot day is going really, really fast. Hey, let's get a jump on tomorrow and shoot a couple extra scenes. Or maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you say, let's explore this scene in a whole other way. What else could we do with this scene? Or there's just so much more creative freedom whenever you don't have to worry about big budgets, big crews. And then you also don't have to worry about them getting into your actors' heads. Whenever you have huge lights, I've seen this happen when you put big lights in front of an actor who's very talented. And suddenly, there's an intimidation factor that kicks in. And it's hard for them to channel the character because they're so fixated with the spotlight and with all the attention. Whereas if you can strip all that stuff away, suddenly it just feels like two people in a room together and they're creating something for fun. And that allows the performances to feel so much more personal because the guard is down and it's easier to access for the actor, themselves. Yeah. And then his last comment about, I think some people get confused between development and pre-production. That's so good. Pre-production is your ability to actually go in and figure out, what do we want to do? How are we going to execute it? And maybe he has a completely different meaning behind this, but whenever I think of what he's talking about here, development is much, to me, sounds more like the big picture idea of, do we got the right people? Do we have the right A-listers? Do we have, a rollout plan? What's our marketing going to look like? Let's make sure we get all our marketing in step. that's big budget headaches. That's Marvel headaches. That's Disney stuff, right? For me, you and I, Todd, all we're thinking about is pre-production. Like, what's the coolest thing we can do with the budget that we have, and go. And that's all we're going to be thinking about. And that's so much more creatively satisfying, and probably more satisfying for the viewer. A lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times. I think, at minimum 50-50. But if you care and you put the thought and the intention into pre-production, you're going to have a much better time on set, and probably a much more satisfying end product. I don't know. That's what I think of when I see that quote.
Yeah. I love that. I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I know, a shoestring budget is not always the answer either. Some movies, you cannot shoot a Bond movie for $1 million. I don't give a shit who you are. And if you do, it's going to be a really bad one,
Yes. Yep.
But, and even a movie like this, it's very surprising that they only spent $1.1 million. It is, but that speaks to, not only the ability, right? But also, because it had to be well written, it had to be well acted, it had to be well directed, well shot, all of those things. But there's also this idea of like, if everyone knows we are just trying to make something cool, the attitude on a set is very different, right? Because everyone is making concessions because they're there because they want to be, not because it's necessarily their job. And maybe sometimes they are, obviously. Yeah. And everybody's got to make $1. That's not what I'm saying. But it's this idea we're all making concessions because we want to be here is a totally different vibe, right? And now all of a sudden, I don't see that light that's aimed at me. I'm just here to perform, and I'm going to perform no matter what. It's just this really cool attitude. I love that too.
And with something like this in particular, the raid, like, why it's so much cheaper to pay your fight team to come up with cool fights. And that's what people are there to see anyway. So it's easier to spend money there, pay them extra 5, 10, whatever it is, 20 grand, and have them work for 6 weeks developing these fight sequences or whatever it is. I have no idea. Again, Aaron, we need you to actually stage some of these ideas, but pay them a little bit more because it's cheaper than having 25 crew members on set, and building out whatever this crazy CGI rig that you need. No, just pay the creative people who are good at what they do and why audiences are there in the first place. That's such a much better use of budget. Yeah. Anyway.
And just knowing what your movie is, right? Like you said, I'm there to see the fight scenes. And that's what I get, right? And everything is, focused around there, but you still get more. You get more story and all that stuff, but don't bore us, get to the chorus.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, as Wes said, always. And we love to hear from you. Let us know if there's something that you'd like to hear us do. Maybe we'll cover that movie. Make sure to subscribe, review us on iTunes and all the good places where you get your podcasts. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch the movies.